Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey guys, just wanted to offer you a free gift here as a part of being a listener of my show. If you go to kfmfree.com, you can get the top 30 books and top 30 success quotes that every man must live by. So obviously every show we talk about books and we talk about success quotes. And so I've compiled the best of the best out of the last 100 episodes into a short guide. So kfmfree.com, and it's all yours. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Akshay Nanavati. He's an entrepreneur, coach, and founder of existingtoliving.com. Akshay, happy to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. Excited to speak with you.
All right. Same here. Let's dive in now with a favorite success quote of yours or some sort of saying that you live by and share with us what that means to you.
Sure. One of my favorites is from Darren Hardy, the publisher of Success Magazine. And he said that earning success is hard. The process is laborious, tedious, sometimes even boring. Becoming wealthy, influential, and world-class in your field is slow and arduous. Sometimes it's not exactly a motivating quote because of what he describes about the process, but to me it's so true and it's so applicable to everything I do. You know, I'm a big ultra runner and that's what running is like. It's just a slow, tedious, sometimes even boring process, but as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will get to where you need to go. And that's why I really love by that quote and live it in all areas of my life.
Yeah, it's like the truth. You know, I think sometimes we want it to sound like it's going to be easy, but he's just saying, hey, it sucks actually.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
really hard. And so when you're going through that suck, like you should know that this is it. Like this is a part of that journey.
Exactly.
You said you run ultra marathons?
I do.
What's the difference between a marathon and an ultra marathon in distance?
Really, anything above a marathon they consider an ultra. So the first one I ran was 50 kilometers, which is 31 miles. So it's just over a marathon, but it's considered an ultra. And then they go up to 50 milers, 100 milers, you know, and there's all kinds of crazy ultras even beyond that. So I'm working on doing a 50 miler later this year and a 100 miler by next year. And I trained for it. In fact, it was my 31st birthday a few days ago, so I ran 31 miles to celebrate.
Wow. And were you always someone who's just kind of like really fit, like PE class, you're setting the track, you know, the class times or what?
Not at all, actually.
Okay.
It's been quite a journey to get here. When I was in high school, actually, I did a lot of drugs. I lost 2 friends to that lifestyle, so I was pretty heavily immersed in it. Just a world of darkness and really no direction, no path. And as I said, lost some friends. And I was very close to heading down that path myself. So it's been quite a journey to get to where I'm at now. It's definitely not been a straight line up all the way for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's go into that. I think your
Sure.
story is really going to resonate with the audience. So you gave us a trailer almost. Let's dive in. Let's get deeper with that story. So, you know, share with us how you got started with what you do.
For sure, yeah. So, you know, as I said, I moved to the U.S. at the age of 13, and about 16 is when I got into that world of drugs, and I mean, I was heavily immersed, cocaine, LSD, marijuana, and you name it, doing it regularly in a very, very dark place, just lost. And actually, the movie Black Hawk Down was a trigger point that changed my life. Have you ever seen that movie, Andrew?
Oh yeah, it's like one of my favorite.
Yeah, it's
a classic movie. I've seen it a lot of times.
It certainly is. It's one of my favorites, as you can imagine too, because it helped change my life. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where, for those who haven't seen it, there's a scene in the movie where two guys up in a chopper, they volunteer to come to the ground to help a fellow soldier that was whose Black Hawk had crashed, and they both died, and they received a Medal of Honor, which is the highest military award for valor, posthumously. But that man is alive today as a result of their actions. So that triggered something in me that what kind of people people would do that? What kind of courage does it take to act like that? And I didn't have and I asked myself, would I be able to do that? And I didn't really have an answer. So I started reading I immediately read the Black Hawk Down book. I started reading book after book after book on military combat, life in the military. And almost overnight, I stopped doing drugs, decided to join the military. And that's when I enlisted in the Marines. And then that was another struggle because I had 2 doctors tell me that boot camp would kill me because of a blood condition I have called thalassemia. So it took me a while just to get into Marine Corps boot camp. At that point, I knew this is what I had to do, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. So finally, after about a year of waiting and getting the medical waivers and doing what I had to do, I finally came to boot camp in 2004, and actually in San Diego, right by the airport out there. And I joined the Marines, and then in 2007, and that's when I started getting into outdoor sports. I've been mountain climbing, ice diving, cave diving. I mean, you name it. In 2012, I spent 1 month skiing across the 2nd largest ice cap in the world while dragging a 190-pound sled for 350 miles. So I've been on some adventures since then. And then in 2007, I went to Iraq. So I had some struggles when I got back from Iraq as well. VA diagnosed me with PTSD. That's when I got into alcohol, and I almost got on the verge of suicide as a result of just being in a very dark place again. And thankfully, I found my way out of that as well. So it's been a lot of ups and downs to get to where I've gotten, and I'm happy about the journey, though. No regrets. It's absolutely no regrets.
Yeah. Yeah. So you watched the movie Black Hawk Down. Classic, still, it's an older movie, but still he holds it down as like a really good, I guess, war drama movie. So that movie came out in 2001. You were in the Marines about 2005 to 2008. Is that about right?
2004 to 2010. So just about there. Yeah. And in 07, 08 is when I went to Iraq.
Okay. And so you joined after 9/11. You joined knowing that you're probably going to go and fight.
I joined waiting to go and fight, to be honest with you. Because
you wanted that. So were you excited when you found out that you were going to Iraq?
Yeah, I had actually been volunteering every chance I could get before I finally got to go. And so when I did go, I'd been waiting for that moment since I enlisted in 2004. Because to me, after watching that movie, combat was a crucible to test myself, to see. And I admit that there was certainly some naive ideas that took me to combat, and I came back with different mentality for sure. But that's what I went out there with. I wanted to be tested, and I wanted to serve something higher than myself, and that really with that being the men next to you.
So you went in with, you said, some kind of different ideologies, kind of wanting to fight, and then you said you walked out with different kind of views of that. What was the trigger point for you in Iraq when your view of war started to shift and change?
I think you kind of realize that, ultimately in war, everybody loses, right? You see, I met an Iraqi gentleman out there who had spent 8 years as a POW in Iran under the Iran-Iraq war. And you could see the guy wasn't obviously fully there anymore. I can't even imagine what it's like to be 8 years in a prisoner of war in Iran. And you see that, how much he valued our presence there. And separate from the politics of the war, not even getting into all that, to me, I felt that we can do some good for these people and we fight for each other. So it wasn't about going out there with this sort of glorious combat and you test yourself like the kind of movies make it out to be. There is no glory. Everybody loses out there, and you just come back to it. But at the same point, there's an addiction to it. There's a growth in adversity. That's why so many people come back. They just want to go back out there, as did I when I first came back home. So you learn so much about the value of adversity, but also the addiction of it. And you realize that this is not, humanity gets really tested in many ways. So the glory of going out to combat to sort of get killed in battle. When I went to Iraq, I went out there not expected to come back alive. I was ready to go out, die in glorious combat and die for my fellow Marines, just with this really naive sense of heroism, if you will. But it wasn't about any of that. It was just about discovering your humanity and the humanity of the people that you're engaged with. And you learn so much about yourself as well out there. That just moments out there helped me shift my whole perspective on life, Okay.
So you come back and you're extremely engaged in outdoor extreme activities. What got you down the path of like entrepreneurship and then becoming an entrepreneur coach and then creating this website existingtoliving.com?
So when I got back, as I said, I was struggling a bit. I wanted to go back to Iraq or Afghanistan. I volunteered again as many opportunities as I could, but paperwork or whatever. It didn't work out, so I didn't get to go. So I was trying to figure out what to do. At this point, like I said, when I went to Iraq, I didn't think I'd come back alive. This was my world, you know? And I also enlisted with the intention of spending my career in the military. After my deployment, I decided that's not for me. And so I had to figure out what to do. And, you know, through outdoor sports, through Iraq, I saw the value of personal growth, of discovering myself, of finding other ways to channel that energy as opposed to, say, drugs or alcohol. So that's when I got into the personal growth arena, you know, just started reading more books. Ever since Black Hawk Down, I became an avid reader in anything I put found interest in. So I started reading a lot of books and really got into that. So I went to master's in journalism school, actually, to shift the paradigm to shift the conversation that was happening. You know, in Iraq, I saw so many good things happening, but no media was out there for that. But we all know about the Abu Ghraibs, and we all know about the bad things that happen out there, you know? So I went to journalism school to help shift that conversation. But my passion for personal growth kind of continued. So after that is when I started building out the site, really just to share some of my adventure stories. And soon it morphed into something more than that, not just sharing my stories and my adventures, but really a way for me to serve people and add value to people through my own life experience and all the triumphs and turmoils that I'd been through. So that's how I got into coaching, because I thought that's a way to help people push their own limits as I have pushed mine, and guide them to learn the value of adversity and suffering as I learned in Iraq, and ultimately use that to create the life that they want to live.
Yeah. So what does your ideal client look like? What does he look like? And what are some of the biggest challenges, common challenges that you just keep seeing from some of your different clients, like over and over again?
So my ideal clients are usually in the entrepreneurial space. They haven't just started out, but they're starting and they've started something and they're looking to build it up to the next level. So what I do is not just, to a big aspect, it's the life coaching element. And another aspect is sort of, you can call it a business consulting element, help them kind of how I grew my business, teach them strategies to build online marketing, a little bit of that kind of stuff as well. But then as I've grown myself, I've had clients come to me in many different arenas. So I have some clients who basically is just life coaching. They could almost be seeing a therapist and they come to me for that, so to help guide them out of that psychological suffering that they're in. And I think the biggest thing that I see universally is an inability to accept, that quote that I mentioned from Darren Hardy, and that's why I value it so much, is an inability to embrace suffering in any form that it shows up. And this is also why I love running and ultra running and adventure sports, because you learn to suffer, and you learn to suffer well. So people struggle with that, not just in terms of psychological suffering, whether it be depression or relationship struggles. Recently I was speaking to a client of mine who was struggling with issues with his wife, and learn how to harness that, learn how to not let that beat you down, to ultimately embrace suffering and do something more with it. There's in neuroscience and spirituality, Buddhism both have the same concept where I've learned that we can't control what first shows up in our brain. So if our patterns are conditioned to respond to, let's say, a certain situation with anger, that's what's just going to show up. We can't control what first shows up, but we can change how we respond to it once it shows up. So many people are victimized by that first part of their brain, and they don't realize the restrictions of free will, if you will. So I help them see that free will is we don't have it as much as we like to think we do, and how to regain control of our consciousness once we're already stuck on a pattern that we already on without being consciously aware of.
Yeah, this is bringing up. Just listening to you talk is bringing up this quote from Marcus Aurelius. He says, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way."
Love it.
And yeah. Just and this is I read this quote from the book "The Obstacle Is the Way" from an author, Ryan Holiday, who's been on this show before, and it's like you said, like, learning to like accept the suffering, like, and almost enjoy that suffering. I can only imagine being an ultra marathon runner. If you're going to run 100 miles, like you better learn how to enjoy the suffering.
Absolutely.
What have you seen happen in your own life when you've done this? Like when you started really just enjoying the suck?
I think for me, I had learned to enjoy the suck in a very physical way, right? Like whether it be the adversity in Iraq, and even in Iraq, 2 months into the war, I was miserable. I hated I expected it to be miserable in some, like physically and adversity, lack of sleep and all that. But I was miserable because I didn't like my officers, I didn't like the situation to certain degrees. But I learned that the rest of my 5-month deployment, I couldn't change the environment around me. All I could change was my attitude towards it. So that's when I started to learn to embrace the suck, if you will, as the Marines say as well, and to value suffering in a physical form. But I still struggled with it psychologically, which is ultimately why I led to alcohol and heavily drinking, and to the point, as I said, of being on the verge of suicide in a very, very dark place. And I got myself out of that. Although physical, exercise was the trigger that got me out of that world, I learned how to value psychological suffering as well. So when you go through those dark moments, when you go through depression, when you go through whatever may come up, to value that suffering, just as you do running. Like I said, I ran 31 miles just the other day for my birthday, and of course you're going to go through pain in those moments. You go through lots of down moments and lots of high moments. And running has taught me that. The reason why I love it is in one run you get to experience the entire spectrum of life. You go through highs, lows, and everything in between, the bliss of just being purely present in a moment, all of it. And it taught me, and I've learned how to harness that and channel it into business growth, into psychological growth, into my relationship. My wife and I have been married 4+ years. We have a fantastic relationship. I couldn't ask for a better relationship, but obviously, like any relationship, there's issues, and we learn to navigate that and embrace the struggle that comes with it. And when you do, you start getting more playful about it. I learned to laugh about the fact that I was on the verge of suicide, or the fact that I struggle with alcohol, and stop being so serious about it. So by making it all lighter, suffering became more fun, if you will. Ultramarathoners often say it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. And I love that quote.
Yeah. It's like we have to suffer. I think we want there to be no suffering. Like if we want something we don't want to go through the suck. And when it does come to us, it's like this horrible thing, and we just want it to go away, or we'll flee or kind of run away from the problem instead of going into the problem, instead of facing the problem, and just like writing it down and then never looking at it, but like going into it and actually getting it done, like facing those fears. Exactly. And fear, stress, adversity, anxiety, these are all sort of similar symptoms. And ultimately, they all are perceived as negative. All those words, anybody listening for the most part was going to think of them as negative words, right? But they're really not. There is no bad and good, I've learned. To this day, I feel guilt about losing friends in war. And I've realized that people always tell me, you shouldn't feel guilty, that it should have been you instead of them, which is to this day, I feel that. And I realized that guilt is not bad. It's how I use it. And now I use the guilt because if I'm still alive today, let me make something meaningful of my life, So the guilt is a driver to keep pushing me when I go through my down moments, like any human being does, right? So there are no bad or good emotions. It's just about what you do with it and how you use it. And fear, suffering, they're so valuable when you learn how to use them. So learn how to use fear. Like, what are some techniques that you could help people with kind of identifying and addressing the fears that are holding them back from reaching their goals?
The biggest one is kind of what is a mindset intervention, really. There's a great book called Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. She's, as it happens,
right, yeah.
She's kind of the master in this whole field of mindset shifts. And they talk about, and I've read a few other books called The Upside of Stress and other books, and they talk about mindset interventions having really 3 parts. One is learning the new point of view. So that's kind of what we've been talking about. Anybody listening, you're kind of, okay, this is expanding your awareness on maybe something you didn't think about before, right? Learning the new point of view. The second is doing something that kind of encourages you to adopt and apply that point of view. So maybe writing something down, seeing how you've found fear valuable in your own life, and looking back for examples of how this has been true. And then ultimately providing an opportunity to use this and share this idea with other people. So when you give this idea to others, it reinforces. So for me, writing a book on fear has helped reinforce my own concepts on these strategies. So that's like kind of the higher level view of the mindset shifts. And they've done multiple studies that show that, in terms of stress, that people who sort of people who look at stress as a positive, they do better on tests than those who perceive it as a negative, even though they had equally high levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, in their body. So it's not that they felt less stress, they just viewed stress as a positive thing. So when you do these mindset shifts, it has a radical change in your whole behavior on fear, stress, and all of that. So that's really the main thing you can do. And then there's all kinds of little strategies of just, sort of labeling your emotions when you see it, shifting the meanings you associate with things, recognizing that free will is a little bit of a myth. And, you can recognize when a pattern shows up, you can say, this is not me, this is my brain. And really separating yourself from your brain and getting more self-aware about the subconscious forces constantly happening in your brain. So small example, a story to kind of validate that. A veteran friend of mine has started reaching out to me on how he's been struggling with some things. And, he used to go through anger all the time. He broke a lawnmower, broke a DVD player because he would get angry at little things that just every time little things didn't go his way, he would get really angry. And a therapist told him that, the anger is a choice. And he was like, well, if it's a choice, then why can't I do anything about it? And I told him not to listen to that advice because it's not. You're stuck in a pattern and you're going to have to learn to embrace that pattern and then channel it to do something differently when it shows up. So through practicing self-awareness, just a few days ago, actually, he called me and said this was the first time something happened. The DVD player broke down and he did not get angry. And it sounds like something small to not get angry, but it's a huge deal for a veteran struggling with it for 4 years to suddenly shift that pattern. And by doing that, you're literally rewiring the brain. Visualization is a huge, huge tool as well. I mean, I had him practice visualizing, putting yourself in a situation that would get you angry and having it go differently. So those are some specific strategies, but the mindset shift is the key, really. That's the main thing you want to practice and implement.
So once a guy starts doing this, I think a common challenge that anyone would experience is like, how do they keep it going? Maybe overcoming their fears for a period of time or for a project or for something going on. But then how do they keep it going so it's really becomes a part of it?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, one big element is the environment, surrounding yourself with people who help you encourage that. Jim Rohn said you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So putting yourself in an environment that encourages you, that pushes you, being around people who inspire you, that's one. Another thing that I practice is called what I call preemptive strikes. That's my military lingo. There's different ways.
I like it.
Thank you. Good. I've heard different people refer to similar strategies in different ways, but what I call it preemptive strikes. And what that is preparing ahead of time for obstacles will show up. So that's where you remove thinking from the element, because so many psychologists have shown how the brain is naturally lazy. It's going to migrate to the easiest course of action. So you want to, as much as possible, remove thinking from the process and make it automatic. So example of how I utilize this in my own life. One day I hadn't slept much the previous night, just going through some stuff in my head. I think it slept about 2 hours. And I had 2 client calls in the morning. And then I had a 6-mile run scheduled right after that. So I knew that after my client calls, if there was one thing I could easily skip, I can't skip my client calls. I could easily skip my run, go take a nap, right? So what I did was I prepared for an obstacle I knew I would show up, the obstacle being my fatigue. So I put on my running shorts, put on my running shoes, my heart rate monitor, my watch, had my iPod wrapped around my arm, and I did my client calls fully ready to go for my run. So by the time the second call was done, I made it as psychologically easy as possible. All I had to do was step out the door. Whereas a simple act of having to put on my shoes and putting on my shorts could have been enough to have my brain say, let's just go take a nap. And that's happened to me before too. So by preparing ahead of time, I preemptively struck and ultimately I got my run in.
Yeah, there Okay. Really kind of planning and making it like reducing the friction is what I'm seeing. Like reducing the friction so it's just it's smooth, it's easy, and it's not as difficult. Exactly. And they've even done studies with these patients in Scotland who are recovering from hip and knee replacement surgery. The ones who planned ahead of time things like, okay, I'm going to take a walk at 4 p.m. and I'm going to take 20 steps before I pause for a second. The ones who planned in more detail, preemptively, knowing that this would hurt or taking a 10-step walk would hurt, they recovered almost 3 times faster than those who did not write down and plan ahead of time for strategies they could act on to prepare for the obstacles they knew would show up. So it really works. Yeah, it really does. So how do you stay motivated? Or do you even believe in motivation? Some guys just like don't, and I kind of have my own thoughts on that too. But what do you do to like keep going? I absolutely do believe in motivation. I think one of those self-help experts has said that motivation is like taking a shower. You got to keep doing it, right? I forget who said that. So what I do is I surround myself with it. I mean, my phone has a background of an ultra runner. My laptop has a background of a guy who's really an ultra runner and says, "Stop wishing, start doing." I watch documentaries about running. I have a vision board. So by surrounding myself with it, I keep putting that in my consciousness so I don't retreat to some of those dark places that I've been, and I have triggers that still show up that will put me in a place, I go to a party and a loud party especially, it'll send me back to going back to that place where I got to drink a ton, so I have triggers that still show up to this day because those patterns are there. Now I'm aware of those triggers and able to do something differently by constantly focusing and surrounding myself with the things I want to be around. So that's why visualization is so powerful. I literally, it's everywhere around me. You come into my house, I have quotes up on my board. I have this one quote from, actually I trained with Jim Jones. Are you familiar with Jim Jones? Is that the fire? Is that the fighter?
It's actually Jim Jones. They're the gym that trained the actors from 300. They train Henry Cavill from Superman. They train a lot of Hollywood stars. They also train military. And they're in the last Men's Health, they were called the world's best gym, and they're often called the world's most hardcore gym. And so they really embrace the art of suffering, as I've been talking about. So I put some of their quotes up on my wall. You know, like one thing I have up, it says, "How far are you willing to go? How much of yourself are you willing to give? How bad are you willing to hurt yourself in order to get what you want?" You know, so it kind of goes on, just really surrounding myself with the environment that reinforces who I want to be. And it all starts with getting clarity on who that is, right? I mean, first you got to get clear on who you want to be, what you want to do, and then keep that around you 24/7, so that when those demons show up, you're ready for them, because they will show up.
So I'm picturing my house is similar. I actually just got a new place. I just moved last week. Cool. I live in a different beach in San Diego, and so I have like posters. I have like Steve Jobs poster. I have like Arnold Schwarzenegger poster. Nice. I have like Michael Jordan poster, and so I kind of get the idea of what you're saying. Like, you surround yourself. Like, you come into my place, like you can, and I have behind me is a library of books that goes up to the ceiling, and you know, it's like you can tell that, like, all right, you come in here, this guy is into, you know, personal development. Like, you can tell, all right, he's up to something here. And so it's interesting. You said you're married, so this is kind of just more off topic. But like, when people who kind of are, maybe I'm dating a girl, or it's a friend that I just met, and so they come into my house and they're just like, whoa. Like, it's very intimidating. It's kind of my filter for people. I kind of look at their face as we walk up, like kind of open the door. I'm like, all right, let's see what he says here, or see what she says here. And so do you ever have people come in your place and they're like, whoa, like, this is too much?
Absolutely. I mean, I get people thinking I'm nuts all the time, right? And you learn to be playful and laugh about it. I mean, when I was training for Greenland, for example, to drag that sled, I used to drag 2 tires around my neighborhood. And you can imagine, you get stopped a lot. People would stop me all the time, be like, "What in God's name are you doing?" So I've got
What kind of neighborhood?
Very
is it?
suburbia. I mean, very suburbia. So I would get stopped pretty often, and people walk into my house. You know, some people are like, "This is awesome." Other people, when they see things like that, I'm on my wall, like, you know, how much are you willing to suffer, or you are not entitled to a damn thing, you know, stuff like that up on my wall to remind me. They get kind of weirded out, but you learn to, you know, you when you embrace it, people come to you because of who you are, and ultimately it's not, you just bring the passion to it, and, you know, it doesn't matter. So even though some people might be weirded out by it, I'm sure you understand exactly what I'm saying. They kind of value it. They're like, that's pretty cool, you know, in its own right. I've noticed, at least. But yeah, people do think I'm crazy all the time, for sure.
Yeah. It's cool though, because you would think someone who would come in and be like, "Oh, this guy's gonna react," but like you can almost see a different side of people when they get to experience your world. It's like coming into my house is like, you can tell, like, yeah, this is Andrew's house. Like, there's just all this stuff going on around here. And some people, like girls, for example, they'll be like, "Wow, like, I really like this. Like, I wish more guys were like this. Like, you know, I think this was lacking in my last ex-boyfriend." I'm saying this because I think some guys might hide, or like they might like not be so proud of really personal development, personal growth. And I'm curious to know, like, you're a veteran, so is it tough for veterans to kind of get into personal development? Do they kind of, or, you know, I just want to get your take on that.
No, that's a really good point, Andrew, and it's a great question as well, because it is. I've noticed sometimes some of the stuff that I can talk about can become kind of what they say woo-woo, you know, like like veterans might not embrace it. They come from it you know, they sometimes, I've noticed, have a hard time embracing it. But I've noticed the veterans that I've started to help is as they go through more struggles, they become more open also to you know, because, okay, look, this attitude is clearly not working. I got to do something differently, right? But it definitely is a little bit of a challenge, for sure. A challenge that I'm working on addressing. But I mean, that's why it's such a valid point you brought up, because I don't often hear people addressing that. But it is that they don't seem to embrace it. You know, veterans are often taught not to seek help and all that kind of thing. If you seek help, you're weak. If you look to all this stuff, it's a perception of weakness, and that's a paradigm that needs to be shifted, for sure. To look at all these things as they're just, you know, this is for weak or for cowards or something like that, you know, that we all have growth. And I think as we more and more start seeing it, it's becoming more prevalent in a lot of veterans I'm talking to now, for sure, because I think like I said, we're struggling. So we're looking for other ways, because we realize this attitude is not helping by any means, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I don't get it when someone's like, oh, like, does it work? Like, I'm not doing magic.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not in my room doing magic tricks. Like, this is just like just a better way of thinking. Like, there are people who have gone before us who have a ton of knowledge because they've gone through crazy life experiences and they've written books and they said, hey, this is what I learned from a lifetime of struggle, of challenges, and I learned these lessons. Would you like to read them? And I say yes. And other people can look at it like, oh, like this is weird. Like you're doing some weird shit here.
Yeah.
Like, I do these mentor retreats where I bring out 10 guys and it's a 3-day intensive retreat. And then one of the guys just sent me an email. And he's like, yeah, I tried telling my friends about it, and all my friends told me it was like a scam, and you should get your money back. And he sent me the email, and he's not thinking at all. He was like, yeah, you know what? I'm so excited. I'm seeing the differences between the average of the 5 people I surround myself with. The Jim Rohn quote, and it's just so powerful. To really just embrace this,
Absolutely.
Embrace the knowledge that's out there. I don't even. Is it magic? Is someone asking like what? I think it's just everyone like. This is just what everyone should be doing is improving your life. Is that weird?
Absolutely. It sounds like, I would love to check that out one day. And it sounds like your house and my house are very similar. So,
yeah, very intense.
Totally.
So are you meditating? Do you do meditation, or what do you do to like hold that will? You have a lot of willpower, man. You're doing ultra marathons. I mean, you've gone through like your own, your story sounds very challenging. There's a lot of suffering. Like, what do you do to like increase your willpower?
I think, willpower is also a muscle. It can be built, but like anything, they've said that, I'm sure you're aware of some of those things, like willpower is a muscle that can also be drained, so you got to make things a habit, right? You can build willpower by practicing. And that really is what it is. I mean, momentum, as you start building momentum on a certain thing, it snowballs, and then you just don't want to go the other way, Like I feel weird if I haven't gone for a run or something like that, So momentum starts building as you start, and you just got to start, even if it's 1 mile, even if it's a quarter of a mile, just start doing something. And then I'm obviously using a running thing. It doesn't have to be running. So one thing is about building momentum, and then as you do, your willpower gets stronger. Because when you do things like Greenland, skiing every day on an ice cap, there's going to be plenty of moments where you're just going to be like, why am I here? And God knows I went through those. I went through, this is the stupidest thing. This sucks. It's minus 50 degrees. I'm cold. I'm miserable. And, why did I choose this trip? And you have to learn to fight that. To some degree, you also don't have a choice when you're out there. But you also have to learn to fight that. And you build that through practice. And then you also make it a habit so that when willpower is drained, so at the end of the day, when you're tired, you've already exercised your willpower, let's say earlier in the day, that it's becoming more habitual. You don't surround yourself. You don't give yourself an out. So, I mean, if I have cookies in my closet, and let's say I have a sweet tooth, is it that much easier for me to eat that cookie at the end of the day when my willpower is weak because I've used it up all day? Of course it is. So don't put cookies in your house. You know what I mean? So create systems that ensure that it's not all about willpower, but willpower is undoubtedly a muscle that needs to be exercised. So the only reason I've gotten better is just through practice. I certainly wasn't, born this way. I mean, in fact, I'm the worst at running. Like, I mean, I have flat feet. I have scoliosis in my back. As I mentioned, I have a blood condition, which I have low hemoglobin in my blood. So that's less oxygen flowing through. I've been told I have bad knees. So I'm not designed to be a runner by any means. And the point that I make is that if I can do it, anybody can. I mean, I'm the worst at all this stuff. I've only gotten better through just practice and hours and hours and hours on the trails,
Yeah, putting in those hours.
Exactly.
You brought up a good point, and then I thought you kind of made me think of something. But like you said, momentum, and momentum to me is like the answer to like get started. You just start really small, and then like I can't like if I eat. I went to a Padre game or a Padres baseball. If you're like Padre game, what is that? Padre, you don't even know who they are because the Padres are just horrible. But like, who are they? San Diego has a baseball team. Yes, we do, and our football team is no better. But we're a beautiful city, so there you go. And it's 80 degrees here. You said it's like 30 over there. So all right, that's what I got on people who have good sports teams. So what I was saying was. Like I went to a Padre game and like I ate a hot dog and I got nachos because I never do it, but I was there and that's like all they serve. And I got really sick. Like, and everyone else was fine, but like I got really sick because I'm drinking green smoothies twice a day. I'm eating like these, like everything I eat is like organic. It's, it's just like as healthy as if it's healthy, like I'm gonna eat it. Like anything that's green, like I'm just all over that. And I get sick now when if I eat. I used to love California burritos. California burrito, by the way, is a burrito with French fries and with carne asada, sour cream and cheese. It's just like it's so good. I used to eat them all the time when I was younger. I eat them now and I get really sick. And it's just like my body, like you said, if you don't run, your body gets sick. Like it's like, what's happening? Like, what are you doing to me? And once you get to this level, it's like you just have to do that. But then what I really thought of, as you talked about momentum, is you can also have downward momentum. And I think downward momentum is even easier. Like upward momentum, think of like climbing up a mountain or stairs. It's like harder each step. It's a lot easier to go down the hill than it is up the hill. And so downward momentum would be like if you're at a party, you said loud music. I'm probably, everyone has Halloween, probably going to go to a party. Downward momentum could be, you have that drink and then you're starting to have a good time. You're like, ooh, this is good. Not too bad. I don't drink that often. So I just have 3 drinks. And then you see an attractive woman, you start talking to her, and then all of a sudden you're 6 drinks in, and then like it just kind of that downward spiral. And it's easier next week to say like, wow, I had a lot of fun. Just keep doing that. And all sorts of other bad things can happen once you start drinking, start smoking, start doing drugs, you hook up, unprotected sex, all just, things can happen.
Absolutely. I mean, downward momentum is easier because, as I was saying, right, like Daniel Kahneman, he Thinking Fast and Slow, that was the book that I was thinking about earlier, when he said that, psychologically our brains are lazy and we're going to migrate to the easiest course of action. So that's why downward momentum is that much easier, because it's our brains are lazy, but upward momentum requires effort, and that's so much harder to do. And I think the more you build upward momentum, the easier it becomes to, let's say, have a cheat day. Like the analogy I always like to give, and I've thought of this in myself, I was talking to my wife about it fairly recently actually, is an avalanche. When an avalanche, you think of and although technically, forget the science, it doesn't start this way, but if you think of an avalanche as one snowball, when it starts up top, it's a small little snowball. As it rolls and rolls and rolls, it picks up snow, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it can start taking down more stuff on the way down, right? You can start taking down a tree. So when you're first starting out, this is my perception, like, people talk about cheat days in exercise. Initially, I could not do cheat days because it would lead to downward momentums. It would do one cheat day led to 2 to 3, right? But now, because I've built up so much upward momentum, I'm an avalanche flying down this hill, if you will, that if I put a tree in the way, so to speak, metaphorically, and that being, let's say, a cheat day, then I can handle it and going right back into an upward momentum the next day, So I think it depends where you're at, but I couldn't agree with you more that downward momentum is that much easier to kind of fall into. So you really got to start thinking about where you're at, where is your level of self-awareness, and start building that. My wife is a big meditator. She's actually a big nutritionist. Funny you mentioned all the green smoothies. So she's trained with Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And so we are both we constantly practice our self-awareness and constantly seeking growth in our own way. And that helps us build that upward momentum so that if a little cheat day comes, we're able to take it in stride and go back right into into who we are and who we want to be. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And what I thought when you said that is your wife sounds awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
How has having an awesome partner, supportive, kind of aligned, how has that helped you on your journey? I think some single guys might think, I thought for a while, like, being in a relationship, it's like time away from the goal. With the goal being whatever it is. Yeah. And what I'm viewing is that having the right partner is beneficial to the goal, whatever that is.
Absolutely. I mean, I could not imagine my life without my wife. I mean, I love her to death, and she is so supportive, especially someone like me. I mean, I'm constantly leaving because I'll go spend a month in Greenland, and I spent a month in Greenland about 4 months after we were married. Not a lot of women, I don't think, would put up with that, right? So she was more than supportive, and she was so cool about it. And so she supports everything I do. And the way we look at it is we both have our own path, and we fully embrace. And I've told her from day one, we both put ourselves first. We put our goals ourselves first, and we support each other in harnessing our goals. So don't get me wrong, it's not that I wouldn't die for my wife or anything, but on the journey, I'm looking at what are my goals and here's what I'm going to do. And so that's why we compromise all the time. We moved to New Jersey because my wife has family here. So that way when I am off climbing mountains or skiing across ice caps, she has family to be next to, So we make compromises, but it's been so much, it's made my journey that much better. I mean, when I was in Greenland, she wrote me a letter ahead of time that I could open once a week. It made my journey that much easier. I couldn't wait for the next week for a week to weekend so I could open her letters, or coming back to her, I mean, even 4 years into marriage, we live like we just got married because we are so close to each other. We love each other for us. I mean, we support each other through our journey, and having that, I mean, I just couldn't imagine doing all of this without her. She makes it that much better. She makes coming back from these journeys that much better. She makes going, it's just everything is better with her around.
Yeah, good. I wanted to address that topic. I think it's
and it's funny. Sorry, but it's funny that you bring it up. Anytime I've done a speech, people always say, I've actually been accused. One person literally almost said that I don't love my wife because I go off and do these things. And so I understand why you brought it up, especially with my lifestyle. It is a challenge for people to kind of fathom how that works.
Well, this is a good topic, and I think some guys can be challenged with that notion of like what's more important here, like the goal, whatever the goal is, or the woman that I've married or in a serious relationship with. And David Deida, this spiritual kind of masculine, feminine type of teacher, like he says, never put a woman before your purpose. It's like your purpose always comes first, and when you do make your woman your purpose, that's when you lose her. Like she won't tell you, but she doesn't want to be the reason for everything. Like she doesn't want to be the only thing, like the main prize in your life. Yeah. She wants to like, it's like, I view this in my head as like, you're a ship, like you're like a carrier military. You're a carrier in the water and you're going on your adventure, and she's going to come along aboard the ship and help you kind of steer the ship and like help you manage the ship. But like, you're not going to just like move your carrier, all right, where you want to go, like, and just go in her direction. I think she would jump off your ship.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. I love that quote. I hadn't heard that one before, but it's so true, And she goes off on these meditation retreats. She'll go for 10 days, and so and we both completely support each other through our respective insanity, if you will. But I couldn't agree with you more. You got to put yourself number one. You got to put your purpose number one. And when I did this speech, my wife happened to be in the room, and she stood up to address this guy who basically said, "How can you love your wife if you do this?" And she said that who am I to stop him from being him? This is who I married. I love him because he is this person, and I would never stop him from being that person. This is what makes us who we are, and that's why we have such a great. Because I've told her, if it was ever in a way that she was sitting here waiting for me, this would never work. We would not be married the way we are. Or we probably wouldn't even be married at 4 years in. So she isn't just sitting here waiting for me when I'm gone. And people often ask her that, which she used to get upset. Now she just kind of laughs it off. People are like, "What do you do when he's gone?" As if she just sits here and waits, But she's like, "I have my own things to do." And so she lives her purpose, and I live mine, and we just support each other on the journey. So I couldn't agree with you more about. I love the way you put it.
That's great. I hope this is hitting home. I'm really enjoying this interview here. I know this is really connecting. We've gone across a lot of different topics here, but I think for Knowledge for Men, I think it's great. Let's now dive into a part of the show I call the knowledge round. Just going to ask you some rapid fire questions here.
Cool.
All right, guys. If you're not reading books, then you're getting left behind. Somebody spent their entire life learning some invaluable lesson, and the best format that anyone could ever put it in is a book. It's the shortest, fastest, simplest way to consume content. So I know there are so many books available, and we talk about books all the time on the podcast. So there must be so many running through your head, and you're wondering, where do I begin? Well, I've compiled the top 30 books and success quotes from all of my guests in the last 100 episodes. So you can get them all for free. If you go to kfmfree.com, you can simply download the top 30 books that every man must live by. Again, that's kfmfree.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, so first question I have here is something I'm noticing about you is you're on purpose. Like, what you're doing, and I believe when someone is on purpose, it's really helping them be more successful in what they want to achieve. So what advice would you give to someone who doesn't have that, and they're really feeling lost, not sure what to do, kind of jumping from one thing to the other?
Yeah. I would say, one is things like I was talking about: do exercise, meditation, read books, to build your own self-awareness of your consciousness, to figure out what makes you come alive. I discovered that through the Marines and outdoor sports. And then once you figure out what makes you come alive, take one step. The way I see it, life is a series of experiments. So just keep experimenting and keep stepping on, taking one step at a time, and then stopping on the way to figure out what you learn from each experiment to apply to the next one. So if this didn't work, so for example, I started with rock climbing and now I've become more of an ultra runner. It was an experiment. Was rock climbing my thing? And I realized, I love it, but running is more my thing, right? So it is an experiment that I want one step to the other to figure out what you love, and then just keep figuring out what the next step is, and also have that higher than self purpose. I think we all need a self purpose and a higher than self purpose, because when we do something for higher than self, again, studies have shown that it'll improve your dopamine, your joy hormone, and everything. So have that desire to serve something higher than you, and then it'll make your own purpose that much easier to find.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. Knowledge for Men, this whole thing started, when I first started, it was supposed to be a dating website. Like 100% dating, like just helping guys go from single to awesome relationship. And in that process of my discovery of working on my own dating life, I found out that in order to become, really good with dating or improve your skill sets with women, you need to become a strong, confident, masculine man. Yeah. And so that was when I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, this is like Pandora's box, and that's Knowledge for Men. That's what it is.
I love it. That's cool.
So what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
I would say kind of stepping on some of the things we talked about was my inability to recognize the restrictions of free will. To kind of bring it to the neuroscience. We talked about the neuroscience, but Buddha said that we're all stabbed by two darts. So the metaphor I always give my clients is that imagine you stub your toe against a door. The first dart is the pain on your toe. The second dart is when you say things like the door is stupid, or I'm stupid, or this house is designed badly, or God hates me, right? So the first dart is my anger when I got back from Iraq, the trigger to drink when I walk into a party. And I realized that, so initially I would succumb to it because I didn't recognize that was not me, it was my brain. So by recognizing my brain stuck in these patterns where limiting free will, I can let go of those second darts and ultimately choose what I want to do when triggers do show up. Because most of us are just victimized by triggers. We're not conscious of how to reframe those triggers, if you will. So letting go, understanding the lack of free will and learning how to harness it when it's there.
I like it. You like it. And can you name a person who's had a large impact on your life, like a mentor? Who is this person and what did they tell you?
I would say someone who's been especially large in my life to get me out through my recent dark places is Jack Canfield. He's the best-selling author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series and Success Principles. I did his Breakthrough to Success seminar, which I highly recommend. I've done his Train the Trainer program. And it just comes from a very humility. And he taught me, he just taught me how to delve further in myself, to understand some of the demons that were plaguing me after coming back from the war, and had me understand who I am better, so that I could do something differently. And that's why he's just had a really large impact in my life, considering how big he is and how famous he is. He comes to things with such humility and humor and playfulness, and out of all the personal development gurus, not to take away from anybody else, he has someone who's directly made a very, very large impact in my life, and really has done a lot for me.
Yeah, it's good. Well, I've seen some of his talks on YouTube. He seems like a very humble type of guy, and he's very well accomplished.
He really is, and he's a great, great, great human being.
That's awesome. Now, Jack Canfield's, written a ton of books. So, I'm sure you've gone through and dove in through a lot of his books. What would you say are 2 or 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and why?
I would say this one being the Success Principles by Jack Canfield. That one is sort of a summary of every personal development idea you could think of in all other books put together in one. He's got 64, I think, Success Principles in there. Amazing book. The next one would be Flow by it's Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience. The guy's name is very hard to pronounce. I think it's like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi or something like that. But the book is called Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience, and that book is great because it teaches you what ultimately it takes to be happy, and it's not what you might think it is. It's all about, he talks about the value of suffering in that too, and how the value of challenge. And finally is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That's one of my favorites. I mean, he was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust in Auschwitz, and just looking at how he could basically go through, just hell on earth and still find meaning in that hell is a true testament to the infinite capacity of the human potential. And that book is that book was the initial trigger that made the big difference for me when I was in Iraq. And so that's one of my favorites as well.
I like it. I have to check some of those out. And
Yeah.
now moving on for, I'm just a big reader, and I think I read too much, but as long as I take a ton of action. Like I work 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. So I'm like, I just read as much as I want, but I think it can appear like all I do is read if you come over to my house. It's like, are you getting anything done? I'm always like quoting books with friends and stuff.
I got you.
Yeah. I love reading. Okay, now scenario here for you. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
I would tell him to never stop finding a war to fight. And if there isn't a war to fight, create one. Because when you have a war, war is simple, right? So you give yourself that simplicity of purpose. You have something to fight for, have something to struggle for every day. And I would tell him not to get complacent. And these are both obviously analogies from my own experience in war. But when you get complacent in war, you forget that you are alive for a reason. You forget your purpose. You start wasting your time. You forget that the world needs you. And that's potentially when you get killed. In war, you get killed. But in real life, you stop living and you just kind of exist. It becomes static and mundane. That's what I would tell my 20-year-old self from the experience I've gained so far.
I like when you said, if you can't find a war, create a war.
Yeah.
I really like that. Today I was walking up the stairs. I went to the gym, and then I'm walking up the stairs to my new place, and I'm kind of like, I looked over at the parking lot, and everyone's gone at this complex. So everyone's working. I work at home, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was thinking, like, what am I going to do? Like, I obviously have lists. You're on the list of things to do. There's all these people, I have clients, and I'm scheduled, of course. But there's a good chunk of my day where it's like, I could just do nothing if I wanted. It's like, I could just be like, I'm done, 4 hours, and I could be done. And I could continue running this podcast and this business, and it's successful. It's great. Or I could spend that next like 6 to 8 hours of free time to just create a war, which is like create something. I'm working on a course right now, and no one's telling me how to make it. Like, I'm making it up. Like, it's my course. And I'm kind of creating this war. Like, I'm creating my own type of project and challenge. No one's telling me to do it. I believe it should be done because I think it's going to solve a big problem. But I really like that. Create your own war.
Love what you're doing. Yeah. And that's why I said the value in war is that simplicity. It gives you direction and purpose. In war, you don't have time to sit idle. You're always on a mission. You're always doing something. So that's what I mean. So yeah. And I like what you're doing as well. Looking forward to checking that out, Andrew.
Yeah. Good, really good advice. So now you've given us a ton of really good life advice, and in many ways, business advice and relationship advice. You've given us just so much on this interview. So even if you summarize some of your main points, that's totally fine. But what would you say, what is your philosophy on life and success?
I think my philosophy on life would be overall, to sort of summarize all this, to never stop taking risks, and the greater the risk, the more you come alive, which is why ultimately I do adventure sports and take risks with my life. And I'm not saying everybody needs to do that because it's a fine balance, of course, but it's made me come alive, as I think Helen Keller once said, that life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. So I think to live fully, and my philosophy is to kind of explore that balance between play and suffering. And I think risk is that line on that balance when you take risks and it could be just walking up to somebody in a bar for, if that scares you. So whatever it may be, take those risks and you'll never feel more alive once you do them. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. I like it.
That's the way I see it.
Got it. This is great. So now, what are you looking forward to now? What's kind of the next thing that you're planning on doing? Like maybe even just going into 2016.
Yeah, the big one is I'm launching my book next year, which I'm really excited about. It's about fear and how fear is not a bad thing. We've talked about suffering a lot. We touched on fear, but that's what the book is about, the other side of fear. And so I'm really excited about that. I just last week, actually, I got a letter from IRS that my nonprofit was approved as a 501c3. So I'm launching my nonprofit next year as well. And that's kind of in partnership with a project that I didn't touch on too much, but I'm on this crazy project to run across every country in the world, really to build a human family that works together together as one for the common good. And when we unite each other through play and suffering, which is what sports ultimately is, we can do something meaningful together. Jim Jones says that a family that suffers together stays together. So what I want to do through this running project and through the nonprofit and through my book is to give back in that way, and to also just explore my own limits all over the world, but to give back and help hopefully create a better world and a more peaceful world. So that's really what I'm excited about for next year.
I like it. You mentioned I got a letter from the IRS, and immediately I got like a jolt in my. I was like, "Ooh, like that doesn't sound." And then you're like, "Oh, and it was great. I got accepted." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." That usually sounds bad when you say you got a letter from the IRS.
Exactly. That's usually not a good thing.
Okay, so book coming out. I'm here on Amazon. It looks like it's coming out spring 2016. Mm-hmm. The Other Side of Fear. Just Google that, and then you can pre-order it, you guys. I'm here on Amazon. Just Google The Other Side of Fear. It pops right up, number 1. And you guys can check up on Akshay if you go to existing2living.com, and then it's the number 2, existing2living.com. Not you don't spell it out. All right, this has been good. This has been a great interview, kind of a wide range, talking about all kinds of different spectrums, but a pleasure to have you here on the show, Akshay, and sharing your story and being vulnerable here on the show.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It was a real pleasure, and I enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.